Three, two, one. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. I'm Kevin Koym, and this is the Venture Outfitter. Excited to be here with you today. We're on site at the VERTEX, U.S. Army's Futures Command's VERTEX program. I'm real excited about this. I am going to take you through some of the notes about what we're seeing here, and we'll hear from our community as well. The main opportunity that we'll be talking about today is the opportunity to plug into this ecosystem and having TechCrunch help you do that through our Venture Outfitter. So part of what we're here to do today is part of the Venture Outfitter is part of the TechCrunch community, where we have a community of practice, kind of like how I practice Aikido, or this martial art that I practiced for many, many years, about how we work with each other, practice with each other, get better. Got a really interesting perspective on that after talking to a bunch of people in the Army and also other professionals from around the world. But we'll talk about this very, very, very soon. That's what today's all about. Thank you to Linda Blackman and her team at DualWorks for being the sponsor of our studio. I miss having the studio today for sure, because I'm actually in a small phone conference room today on site, because I'm going to run back to this conference later today. But Linda, I appreciate what you do for TechCrunch as well as entrepreneurs. If you're looking for a point of presence, like anything from a mailbox to a closed door offices to a bunch of closed door offices, they have a really great offering there, and take advantage of it. In fact, as a TechCruncher, you get special access to those programs. So please take advantage of it. Today, thought for the day. What we have before us is breathtaking opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. John Gardner said that. I really thought that this was an interesting perspective to think about. What we're going to talk about is the U.S. Army is looking into human performance, but I think many times as entrepreneurs, I've been sharing stories about entrepreneurs and how we help entrepreneurs, be better performers. Obviously, that's a little bit different when you're looking at it from the U.S. Army's perspective, but it's interesting nevertheless. When we're faced with problems, part of the biggest issue is looking at the gift inside of them. And I don't mean all woo-woo. I certainly can give you a woo-woo frame around this statement, but it's interesting to think through about how is it we can get to the lower level type of idea behind every problem and find the solution in it. Too many people say, that doesn't work. We tried it last week. We tried it last month. We tried it last year. We tried it 10 years ago and it didn't work. And the world is changing so fast that I think many people don't realize how fast the world's changing. And I just want to throw it out there that there's a real big possibility. We'll talk about that. So today's program is, I am the U.S. Army Futures Command and the Army Applications Lab, which is based here in Austin, Texas. They moved their Futures Command to Austin a few years ago. It's really interesting having this group of people here. Also, the Air Force equivalent is here as well, called AFWorks. And we haven't necessarily done a lot of work with them yet, directly as TechCrunch, but a lot of our companies have. As part of the program that they're working on, it's like a U.S. Army Futures Command VERTEX conference, and this is all about human performance. I'm going to go over the 10 areas that they're looking at, and I'm going to give you some of the perspective of some of the speakers that I've seen and stuff like that. And as soon as I finish up, I'm going to be running back downstairs to be a part of the conference. It's a really interesting conference. It's a very small conference. It's only 150 people. I was real excited to be asked to participate, because it's an invite-only kind of thing, and not to be all exclusive, but part of the role that that I'm in on your behalf is introducing some of the practices that we use with entrepreneurs, but then also representing a lot of the technologies and insight that you guys have to the Army and to other parts of the military. And it's really interesting because I've been sharing in the context of human performance. I've been talking a lot about this, and I think that this is a thing. One of the biggest issues that I've come to a conclusion around is a lot of my personal process as an entrepreneur has been, how can I improve my own performance? How can I work through my own issues, whatever they might be? And I think I've told you that I've gone through, and someone was giving me a hard time because I've never published the list of 29 different heavy type of things that I've done and in working on my own performance. And I'm realizing, and a lot of that I bring into the conversation with entrepreneurs. And I think that the thing that's interesting about that is that there's this interesting perspective about how we can actually use the insight that we might gain from the military or some other process to then leverage it for our own performance. I'm going to talk through that, but I'll give you kind of an overview. This is the overview of the actual calendar of what's happening. It's kind of like, keynotes, followed by a couple of panels, followed by a really nice networking type of lunch where everyone's kind of interacting. I think the Army or Army Applications Lab has really done a good job of creating this frame. I've never seen a conference where there's so much interaction among the people, and I think that that's what they really are trying to get at. But as keynote, couple of panels, lunch, keynotes, couple of panels, or breakout sessions. I'll go through each one of the areas it's interesting, and then I'm going to give you some reflections from the breakout session that I was in yesterday. A few things to say about the speakers and stuff like that. I've really been impressed, especially with one of the keynote speakers that I'll give kudos when we get to that slide. But part of the idea in this, and I'll just read this for the people that only hear the audio. VERTEX is all about soldiers are the U.S. Army's greatest resource. We must safeguard their physical, mental, and emotional health by investing in the tools to aid them and support them. So there are 10 areas of interest. If you follow this QR code, and this will be in the show notes as well, you can actually see the website that the Army's put together for VERTEX. And they're being very open about this because, one of the things that's interesting is I already had a couple of people say, hey, Kevin, aren't you worried about sharing this information? No, the Army's being very open. Part of what I'll say is open systems disrupt closed systems. Open societies disrupt closed societies. We've talked about that on previous talks, especially authoritarian regimes can't stand up to open societies. And so part of what I'm really happy to see, and I think is a strength, is to see how open the Army is being about this information. So if you want to go to that website, you can, and you can find out a little bit more about what's going on with regards to these areas. Now, part of the reason I'm going in detail about this, whether you hear this later through our newsletter, or you hear it through the podcast, or you hear it, or you're here live in the actual program, is I really want to say, I want to have this be a call out to all of our startups, both, in the US and in other parts of the world. If you have offers in these areas, I would surface them. I would surface them quickly. And if you do not know how to do that, I'll start with a reminder, especially as we go through these different areas. The simplest way of doing this to make sure that you're on the radar is to go to techranch.com/contact us. There is a detailed form there. A lot of times people will send me direct emails and I'll say, hey, thanks for your email, but go ahead and send it to that, because part of what's happening is we're building the team and we're working on the pipeline of getting this information in. Is we're actually, every week we've had something happen where we're getting better about how we're managing this information. And to take the follow-up on this, it's going to be even more critical. Don't just send me an email. Make sure you're on our radar, not just my personal radar, but our radar, so that we can actually organizationally follow up with that. So that, again, is techranch.com/contact us. So let's hop into those 10 areas of interest. First one is speeding warfighter recovery with new technologies. The Army wants to get smart on technologies and techniques used by professional athletes, so that they can help soldiers with little or no supervision to support recovery during on and off duty periods. That was the first area. A lot of the information that we've seen has been around athletes. Obviously, entrepreneurs have something to offer that as well. Second area was reducing recovery time between cognitively demanding activities, diving into game-changing solutions that monitor cognitive and physical states and provide real-time, near real-time data interpretation and intervention. A lot of what's happening in this case is there's a lot of activity that's happening on the battlefield on just all this information that's being presented. You now have soldiers with heads up displays and all that sort of stuff. And how do you actually give them information with so much information coming at them? How do you actually, support them? And then also the recovery time about that. Third thing is fighting chronic and acute occupational stress. And it says, we need hyper-resilient soldiers who can self-regulate and persevere under stress, reset and recover, maintain optimal performance and mental health, while cultivating stronger teams. And I think there's two parts of this, and many of the people that I saw reflecting on this recognize, actually, there was a group of guys that have very old school type of mentality about this, that they're so focused on the individual, making the individual hard, that they're not hardening the team. And so I want to make sure that I reflect on the second part of that statement of all while cultivating stronger teams. Fourth one, expand cognitive capacity to fight and win on the battlefield. Explore how to increase mental readiness in the face of intense, rapidly changing and fatiguing conditions, helping soldiers maintain consistent high performance. Now, this is the area that I went to the breakout session about, and I'll go into more details about what came out of that from my notes on that. The interesting thing about it is they were actually having us solve Rubik's Cubes, or having someone who is an expert use words to tell another person who has no experience with Rubik's Cubes about how to go through that. It's really interesting because a lot of what was happening, and then there was noise happening and all sorts of distractions. Then the colonel that was leading the process was trying to prove the point or show the point about how difficult this is. The most important reflection that I was happy to hear, some of the guys were so focused on physical performance that there wasn't any talk about mental or emotional response. And I think, yes, we need to have our warfighters have this really intense ability physically. Got it, right? That's part of being a soldier. But what was interesting is the divide among people in the room not recognizing how like in the battlefield of the future, there's also the emotional, mental part of this. And I was really surprised by that. There was one gentleman, in fact, I kind of gave a little bit of a hard time, took a little bit to task, who was so focused on just what type of food the soldier's eating, that, just put food in, blah, 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 and everything else is going to be fine. I think his company, I think he was actually doing this because his company sells provisions to the Army. I was really disappointed in that. But I was happy to see that some of the people from the Army actually recognized. In fact, one of the leaders of West Point, who the colonel that leads the elite leadership training at West Point, who I am going to invite onto this program in the coming weeks. She stood in and she said, yeah, it's, she's got 1,000 leaders that she really focuses on. And she got it. She totally got it about, the emotional, mental recovery, especially bad things happen on the battlefield. How do you actually help that person reset? I was really happy to see her specific voice. And I'm sorry that I don't have the colonel's name right in front of me, because I was, this was a moment to hear her talk about this in this one breakout session. I was proud to be an American, and I've never really been into football, but I'll say go team West Point, and I think that there's a football game this weekend, so go Army. The next one, optimizing sleep for physical and cognitive performance on demand. Discuss a range of non-pharmacological technologies that can help soldiers sustain alertness in operational environment when sleep is not possible due to mission requirements. I was really bummed and I missed this one, because those of y'all that know me know that I've actually had insomnia. I'm like, so I'm going to try to find out more information about this so that we can get it back into our entrepreneurial brains, because many of you, like me, are up against lots of stress that prevents you from sleeping. We don't face the same type of stress that our soldiers do, but still it's an important thing. And it was interesting to hear that there's other ways of dealing with this. One of the most interesting things in the general session, though, about this was that it sounds like that the Army has become aware of how critical this was, that this is, that in previous iterations, like one of the commanders was actually talking about recognizing, I mean, I didn't get to spend a lot of time in this session, but I did because I'm curious about it. One of the key things was they used to just sort of say to our soldiers, hey, just suck it up and, deal with it. They now understand that sleep is one of the most important things that helps reset the soldier for sustainability. And it's interesting that a lot of the things that you and I know is just the basics, meditation and sleep were two of the things that they really were talking about. We're not talking about massive technologies. We're just talking about some of the basics, some of the stuff that we've known about already for a very long time. I was pleasantly surprised to see how there was a focus on that from just, the sensitivity that the Army has, that they see it now as essential. But then secondly, just a reminder to us as entrepreneurs about how important that is as well. 6, manage what you measure, maximizing wearable technology for military use. Explore how the military can maximize tech in wearables to measure and impact cognitive performance, physiological stress, recovery, and optimized feedback and training. There was some interesting stuff that came up from, the guys there was some interesting stuff that came up from the guys about this. This is one of the more obvious things that I think we'd actually see, like IoT, Internet of Things type of devices being put on a soldier and stuff like that. So the one thing that I'll share when we get to the slide about Apple and the Apple speaker that spoke is how they think about technology. And I want to make sure that we spend some time about it. Well, I'll share that when we get to the Apple slide, but it's interesting because most of this was pretty obvious, except for the way that they're talking about your phone and how Apple's thinking about your phone. I've got some notes about that, so I won't steal my thunder in the next few slides. Number 7, turning data into insights with system integration and architecture development. Take stock of human performance systems, architectures, and processes required to gain insight into soldier data for enhanced health, fitness, and mission readiness. Again, this is one of the more obvious areas. We will be following up as TechCrunch in the coming weeks. There's a platform for just measuring, kind of checking in, how you doing kind of stuff. And I'm curious about that because I'm wondering if we could actually apply that into our community about how we check in, since a lot of us work so separate from other people. We don't have necessarily large companies that we're checking in from. And so there's an interesting set of concepts here. We'll talk more about that as we get into it. Number 8, using multimodal info to improve human performance, learning about immersive and multimodal display technologies, including those that leverage augmented and virtual reality to improve situation awareness, reduce signal noise, and help soldiers analyze and understand critical information. One of the entrepreneurs that we've worked with in the past that has based in Austin, and part of his team is up in Temple, Texas. I got to see this specifically, but part of the idea here is, everyone knows about the layers of information and the design of user interfaces and UI, UI UX kind of activity. What's interesting is the technologies that are coming out that are not just, VR, like, virtual reality, like we've seen, but something that's much more sensitive. The thing that I actually think is interesting is some of the training statistics that were coming out of user interfaces that looked much more like if you ever saw the Matrix, especially in Matrix 3, where they're allowing, for those of y'all that didn't see the movie, there's a shipping dock that is where one of the ships is coming into the dock area, and the person that's actually opening up the dock has a very interesting display. That metaphor is now available to us in real life, which is interesting to see. It's like kind of cool to see that multimodal, like much more like virtual reality that's not fake, but virtual reality that's actually interesting layers on top of the real world. Number 9, speed and precision, the winning advantage. Explore tech that can increase reaction time, accuracy, and precision in high demand situations faced for law enforcement, race drivers, sports professionals, soldiers, and others. Pretty much straightforward about what that is, just like how can we actually have that information presented. Just like a little bit different take on the area that we were talking about earlier. And then number 10, final one, solutions that lead to useful, actionable knowledge and positive behavior change. Examining learning tech that end users actually want to adopt to help soldiers embrace human performance optimization and strategies to enhance performance. Interesting distinction on this one is soldiers will do what they're told. But part of the thing that the Army was really focusing on about this is how is it you create situations where the individual wants to do stuff, not just because he or she has been told to do it, but that there's a deeper pull into that area. Interesting perspective. When we get to the Apple discussion again, I'll give you some a couple of tidbits that tie into this area. Lots of different things that are said. Some of the stuff I could actually spend the whole time on the VO Weekly going into details about some of the stuff I learned. The slide on the page goes through and gives some different quips about like the upper left. I'll iterate, because a lot of times us entrepreneurs are perfectionists. And what it says is, don't worry about the perfect solution. Do the perfect for right now. Right now. And I think sometimes we forget about the right now notion of things. And part of one of the speakers was saying, hey, the concern should be, don't try to get it perfect. But one of the things that she said was, every 3 years and every 10 years, or she said not just years, but every 3 years and every magnitude of 10, there's like something that changes, whether it's people or time, that you're forced into with a rate of change of technology right now, and just the size of teams, that you're forced into changing things. So recognize that the best you're going to be able to do in the world that's coming, in the world that's here now, is this idea of the solution for right now is all there is. Really interesting perspective. Some of the other areas I thought was interesting is the 4 CIO archetypes post-pandemic. There's a recognition both in the Army and some of the corporate individuals that were in the room that a lot of times the CIO has become the block for the adoption of technology. And it was interesting to go through these different types. I know that because I've always been an innovation guy, right? I fought against some of these entrenched types. We'll go into this more in the future. I think this is going to end up being an interesting conversation to have. We'll have Russ Finney, who's one of the, who was listed in the Armstrong. He's a TechCrunch advisor listed in the Armstrong report as one of the top 5 CIOs in the United States, or most influential CIOs in the United States. I think this would be interesting to reflect on in that. The other thing that I thought was interesting is to hear from the Google perspective, Eric Schmidt. You have to have you have to have the right culture and you have to get it right. The story of innovation has not changed. It has always been a small team of people who have a new idea. And then he reflected on defense. His defense doesn't have an innovation problem. It has an innovation adoption problem. One of the things that was interesting about this from a standpoint of us as entrepreneurs that are selling into different organizations, whether the Army or not, is a lot of times you'll get the organization to say something interesting about, hey, we want to engage with you, but then they don't adopt your technology into the larger group. Given that I did, innovation work and built skunkworks for most of my career, especially before I started Tech Ranch, this is a really interesting perspective to see that the Army recognizes that they know that, they've got all this money through the Army Applications Lab to innovate, but then, the generals on top are kind of like saying, hey, well, wait, that's not how we do it around here. That's great. You got some newfangled way of doing things. And so I was pleased to see that they're not being shy about this type of this attack on how do we actually bring innovations into the Army. And then the other implication is, I think that part of the problem we have in a lot of America, and I'll say the other parts of the world as well, but in America or in the United States specifically, is companies, give lip service to innovation, but the truth is there's a lot of resistance to it. And so I think I'm going to really listen in on this, because I think that, for those of us, given that the Tech Ranch is really focused on a community of practice of entrepreneurs that are doing their best to take on the world and change things, I think the insight that these guys have is important for us. So one of the questions that we asked is, what will be the most important skill in the 21st century of the world that comes? And it was interesting. You can only see part of the slide because I was trying to give the perspective of what's happening. There's a picture of the soldier with the latest equipment on to the right. And then the thing that was on the left of the slide, and I didn't realize that it got cut off, the most important skill that Alexis Bonnell, who is at Google, was saying is going to be curiosity. Right now, we have a lot of people, the perspective from Eric Schmidt on the slide before was there's this lack of curiosity in a lot of different ossified organizations. The curiosity is being blocked, but it's the only thing that matters. We're at the point now that things are shifting so much within, every 2 years, there's now a breakaway technology. One of the things that I heard earlier today, as an example, one of the speakers that I just came from right before I ran up to this presentation room or this phone room to speak with you, is the most disruptive technology since the internet has been launched. It's the AI. The gentleman was specifically talking about the GPT AI from OpenAI.com, and that it's just totally revolutionary, and it just got launched, and it's already taken hold on a lot of different things. The biggest issue going into the future is the people who do not have curiosity. A lot of people actually say adaptation is the number one thing, but now it's about curiosity. Like, you have to actually have the sense to want to understand what's happening to be prepared for adapting. I think that was an interesting perspective. I really enjoyed that. This was the second keynote speaker from Google, a woman by the name of Alexis Bonnell. I'm going to try to get her to come speak to us as well, because such a fresh perspective. She's been a world changer. She worked for the USAID. She's worked in a bunch of different organizations about adoption of technology. She's now at Google. It's really interesting to hear her perspective about curiosity being so important. And so just more information about maximizing cognitive performance is interesting. This is the whole thing that's been going through. Every panel has been about cognitive performance, physical performance, all the different things there. The gentleman from Apple as well. I'll go into my notes in just another few slides. You can kind of get a sense of the size of the crowds. Very small crowd for a conference. I kind of like the fact, though, that it was like that, just because I think it shows the seriousness of what they're trying to do. Now, this also, back to our community, though, is why it's important that if you have something you want me to surface to this, we are going to have access to the decision makers that were represented in this room as part of it. One of the other panels, to just give you a sense of the type of people at VERTEX, both soldiers, vets, as well as technologists of lots of different stripes. So now into some of my notes. Apple's Doug Beck, who's the VP of Worldwide Institutional and Public Impact Business, he reflected on Steve Jobs' original vision about amazing products that enrich people's lives. Is this whole idea that technology must serve humanity and be able to, and humanity must be able to trust us. This privacy discussion that we're hearing in Apple, I didn't realize that they were so serious about it. And actually, after hearing, it's like this device, I've got my iPhone here that I'm holding up in front of the screen. This device, really, if you don't trust it, if trust isn't implicit in this, you're not going to carry it with you. It's one of the interesting things. I was happy to hear how strong Apple is focusing on that the device has to be trustable. And that's partially, as soon as Apple launched this most recent version of their software, I turned off all the application tracking where people were tracking me across apps. Because, privacy is important, but it was great to hear about their perspective. We'll find out more about that and follow up with you about it. On the panel for maximizing cognitive performance, the main thing was this whole idea of making things brain-friendly, creating a brain-friendly environment for decision-making. Don't remove the stress, just use the trauma-informed approach. I really loved seeing the perspective, given those of you all that know me know that I've actually spent a lot of time with the trauma, looking at how is it we actually uncover trauma, because everyone's been exposed to trauma. Now, some people have been exposed, and if you're solving all the world's problems, one of the things about it, a lot of times trauma underlines a lot of those problems, the reason that they're not been resolved. But they said, don't remove the stress. It used to be that the Army was actually saying, would remove the stress. And as they remove stress, they remove performance. So it's not about removing stress. It's about having a trauma-informed approach. Some of this research is available publicly at optilab.net. Like as an example, finding the biomarkers for stress was there. One of my favorite quotes for the whole conference was, Yoda wasn't training lightsaber skills. He was talking about self-regulation. When I heard this, I kind of found myself in the stuff that I like to talk to about entrepreneurs about. Many of you know that I'm a fan of the lean startup practices and other, frameworks and stuff like that. But my biggest concern a lot of times is the individual and the team's ability to self-regulate. And this quote from this one speaker was right on. Yoda wasn't training lightsaber skills. He was talking about self-regulation. I see this in the Aikido training that I've had as well, that a lot of times, it might not be about the actual skill of, especially since most of us are not going to be in combat situations ever in our lives. A lot of the self-regulation thing is where the focus should be. So I want to make sure in the one channel, we have a channel that right now I think is called Human Performance. I think I'm going to change the name of the channel in the community site to Personal Development. And I'm going to be pouring a lot more of the stuff that I've been exposed to there, just because I think it's important. Breathing, one of the most important things. It was interesting to hear about how many people from the Army were talking about teach your people to breathe, teach your people to meditate. It's the simplest things. We should be talking about that from a standpoint of our entrepreneurial practice as well. We're not in the same level of stress as a warfighter would be, but to see them actually talking about that was It was interesting. And then the final thing from this panel was 30 minutes of moderate activity per day, like moderate exercise, has an over-the-top impact for performance. It was interesting to see that several of the people on this one panel, the 4 people that are on the panel, said this, but this one gentleman actually articulated the best when he just said, just do 30 minutes of moderate activity. So I'm changing around my schedule because I've been slacking off. And the data actually says that, if you just do this, nothing else, you think that it would be, you think that the thing, number one thing that I'd learned out of this conference is some kind of new device or something like that. No, 30 minutes of activity and meditation. So yeah, you'll see me get back to that. I'll do the meditation, but I think I'm going to be even more serious about it now. And I'll make sure that I bring this up more for us as entrepreneurs. So my favorite speaker during the conference thus far is Alexis Bonnell, the emerging technology evangelist at Google. And this is the person I've told you the most about during our talk. Her first point was be mindful of using it's interesting. She said that she worked at USAID, and USAID is focused on democracy and focused on all these different, very important things. But then part of the thing about it is, she said, too many of these programs forget about the focus of focusing on democracy doesn't matter if you don't actually focus on the actual end user of the technology or interaction or support. Like the woman in Africa is an example. If you don't actually deliver to that individual what's needed, it doesn't matter. She had a specific example that was beautiful. Curiosity is the number one skill of the future. You already saw me talk about that on that slide. And the levels of 3 and the levels of 10, it's like, this whole idea that as you add more than every 3 times people that you add, or the number of 10, whether it's 3 years, or 10 people, the system has to change. And it's okay to fix it for right now. Don't build systems as time capsules, but instead as change engines. And she gave a bunch of different examples about how most IT systems are time capsules, but they don't really they're not open enough for changing into the future. And then she's one of my other favorite things is she said, serve up decisional context. Bring the data together. And she gave a couple of different examples that all the military guys knew about how they used to have to mentally fuse information. I just recently was asked if I would volunteer for this one program that I've taken a lot of classes in the past, and someone asked me, and this person is sending me all these different text messages. And what I realized was the text messages, because they're not one point, I don't have a decisional context to be able to make a decision if I'm going to make this big commitment to volunteering. I hear that in what she was, what Alexis is saying is serve up a decisional context. Don't make the person fuse in their brain all the data, put it in one thing. And then the final thing that she said, and is really powerful, is make ourselves permeable to information. Many of us tend to shut out other information about things, and really that's a problem. That's a problem, and that we have to be permeable to information, and then know that some of the information that we might be presented, whether it's in a context of a warfighter or context of the entrepreneur, some of it's going to be off. Some of it's going to be off. Like I think I've told you all somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously, every once in a while, when my mom was worried about me being an entrepreneur, even after I was a millionaire early in my career, she was like, hey, Kevin, don't you want to just go get a job? I had to be permeable to other people, not just shut them out, but then, hey, mom, it could be just that simple. Like, listen, don't shut her out, but also know when to turn it off too. Silly little example, but it really rung it home for me. And then one of the final breakouts that I enjoyed is that this is when we actually really got to really dig in. This one colonel was leading about 40 of us in a conversation about expanding the cognitive capacity to fight and win on the battlefield. Mental breaks to maintain readiness. When you're working on stuff, get it from your desk and take a break. and make sure that like in the Bible or many other different things, it says, hey, on 1 day a week, don't work. They presented all this fancy data that says the exact same thing. It was interesting to see that, this is the colonel that actually talked about sleep, just saying, if you can teach your soldiers to sleep, actually, if you could teach your commanders to have your soldiers be as aggressive as possible about getting that sleep cycle that they can, and have it be something that's a really powerful thing. I really love the idea. I've never heard of the word. Well, I've heard of the words before of overmatch. How do we overmatch? That is, if you're going to go to fight to win, fight to, and how, the idea about continuing to expand the capacity. And then my final note here is like, I'm really looking forward to a session that's happening at 2:00 today. Gregory Lieberman's multimodal information. But that's a note as much to myself as anyone else, but I will have more data later today, and I'm real excited about it because there's a number of people here that are just like doing amazing work. My goal, again, on this is to bring this information to us as entrepreneurs, and then also to surface technologies that you all have and technologies, practices otherwise that you have into this group of people, because I think that it's going to be really powerful, really powerful information. Again, just closing on what the VERTEX is all about and the follow-up about the type of thing. Soldiers are the U.S. Army's greatest resource. We must safeguard their physical, mental, and emotional health by investing in tools to aid and support them. And, it's the exact same thing about my intention with the venture outfitter for our entrepreneurs. Obviously, I hope that none of you actually have to ever face combat situations like these soldiers are, but I think we can learn from them. And we'll continue to follow up about that. With that, I think that there's a person or two. Whoops, I meant to go to this slide, and then I'm going to tick it off. I think there's a couple of us that wanted to say a couple of things about what's possible with some of the technologies we're looking at and things like that. I know I'm getting a bunch of chat messages and some messages on the that I've, since I'm on this really tiny screen, it's really hard to actually follow up today. But Denise, I know that you had something you wanted to share in this context. Why don't you hop in and join us and tell us your perspective and about the things you're doing with some of our young people and students and stuff like that.
Okay, I think that the digital gaming stuff is critical with the AI and the virtual reality stuff they were talking about. If we can get involved with the Army and their families and use it as an individual plus their family focus, I think we could do a whole lot of preventive mental health, wellness, and safety stuff through the gaming format and using the virtual reality and the augmented intelligence. The Army appears to have a nice way of compiling the data and gathering the data that I think we could copy. The other piece of this is that I just got a huge, aha when she's like, present the information now and present all of it all at once so somebody doesn't have to make their conclusions. We know all of this works. We just have to figure out how we can get in on the research end and the data collection so that we can continue to improve and make it real and make this really concrete, because the meditation and the breathing, seriously, we can all do that, and sleep.
I know. It's such a simple thing. And like as I was sitting there, well, because I think part of the thing that I've had sleep disruptions about, there's been some tragedies that happened in my life. But the thing about it is I was sitting there just like this, trying to, sitting still is hard for me, especially after a night of not sleeping. And it's such a basic thing. It's such a basic thing. Whether for our kids or ourselves as entrepreneurs, or in this case, our war fighters.
Yeah, It is. And I know there are soldiers retired, like, Vietnam veterans and stuff like that, that taught themselves how to sleep in the midst of battle.
Yeah.
And how to stay focused, and how to say and meditate, and whatever I know they did it, otherwise they didn't survive.
Yeah,
So,
no. Well, you see that even in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, right? He talks about how he's a little frail man that was a Jew that was incarcerated in, like in Dachau, I think it was. Actually, I don't remember it specifically. And how is it that he made it? He talks about the exact same thing. Those are the things that I really want to dig in on that. Now, back to the thing you said earlier. I know that in some of our other ed tech companies, we have a couple of them that are looking at SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grants. I have never known a lot of that type of world because, I've always been a startup guy, and I've kind of always ignored the government. It just never really occurred to me to pay attention there. I do want to make sure that we have more of us that are looking into SBIRs, because the U.S. Army surfaces this. Like one of the guys that, I've seen a lot over the last, not during COVID, but, on the year before COVID. And then over the last year, he's like, hey, Kevin, how come y'all never look at blah, blah, blah? And, how come you never look at these grants that are available? Part of the thing about it is that's where I want to call out to the larger community. Sometimes I get worn out by too much text overload, but that's one thing to look at. I do know that we have one of our teams out in Florida is going after an education SBIR. We should keep an eye on the Army ones as well for learning environments and stuff like that. Because part of what they're trying to figure out is how to cultivate the right type of learning environments for fast acquisition of information.
Absolutely. Okay.
And so, working with children is part of it. I know that there is also NSF grants that are NSF SBIRs. The one thing I'm asking the community, and I'll put you on the spot, Denise, since you're here,
Thank you.
Is to say, hey, someone look at that. I have access to some of the relationships to support that type of stuff. The frustrating thing is, it takes a village to do that sort of stuff, and we can actually pull more activities together around those type of grants.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I don't even have the list of places to look. So if you have people that,
I know, if nothing else, since we have Melvin here today, what we can do is we could take a handful of us off of Spotlight, and I will put all four of us in the Spotlight. Part of the thing about it is Melvin has access to our grants Trello board. And for people that are in the community, for known people in the community, I would have any one of you guys be on that grants Trello board, because part of what's possible is by leveraging that, we have sources and stuff like that. Now, the grants I'm talking about right now are at grants.gov. But there's a larger set that are available to us all. In fact, there was a grant that we just missed opportunity. It wasn't in ed tech, but we just missed because we just didn't have we have a call out to finding a grant writer at this point. We don't have, right now, Tech Grants does not have a grant writer. And so that being said, most of these opportunities, several of the companies could tear into together.
Okay.
What else? Melvin or David, since you're in the studio audience, did either one of you guys want to reflect on any of the stuff before we wrap it up? And also, I know I haven't been able to look into our streaming sites as easily. There's questions out there as well. We'll take the questions. I know that I'm getting a bunch of different notes back and forth and all that sort of stuff. But anyone else have questions before we wrap it up for the day?
I can make a statement.
Yes, please.
It's kind of a maybe a little bit trite, but I mean, being a soldier, I think, is a very honorable profession. And, it's all about defending our values, defending what's important to us and things. So I'm glad the U.S. Army has these kind of initiatives, and it seems like a really smart way to go about it, to make sure that we're effective. We can see right now with the war in Ukraine that sometimes we really have to fight for our values. Sometimes it's not enough just to hug a flag or something like that. You have to actually get up and do something you wouldn't normally want to do. So I'm happy that the Army is doing this stuff. Not super relevant to your presentation, but
no, I think it is. I think the thing that I'll echo what you're saying, David, is, obviously with the war in Ukraine, that Ukraine did not invite, at least from my perspective. I see no evidence of that, and I think it's unjust. I think we do have to stand for our values, and those of you that know me know that I do express my First Amendment rights about being critical of the government at times. I have been critical a lot, but it's part of being an American. And I realize that part of the thing that we have is we have this conversation, and quite honestly, one of the things about this conference that I told the gentleman who's running the conference, is putting together his conference, his first name is Nick. He actually is part of the Army Applications Lab. I told him last night, I'm like, kind of makes me proud to be an American that there's this frank kind of conversation from, one of the toughest organizations that brands itself is like, they're war fighters, they are U.S. Army. I'm really happy to see that. And those of you that know me know that I can be pretty critical. I don't stop at the border of the U.S. I'm critical of Americans, critical of lots of different things, because I think that we can critique things and actually figure out how to make a better world through being open about it. But yeah, you're right. This conference has made me proud to be American. That we're actually really taking on these conversations. I think that it points to in a future that we've talked a little bit about Jeremy Rifkin's work, and we'll go into detail on that in one of these sessions. About there's a book that came out about a decade ago called Empathic Civilization, and the idea is in the future, the organizations that are empathic to the way the world is and how their role in it are the ones that are going to survive into the future. And so it's cool to see, at least at some level, and this is only a part of it, but at some level, the fact that the U.S. Army is having these kind of conversations, that, the core part is about soldier performance, but the underlying thing is more about how is it that we actually have a culture that works, right? That's really what the point. I love that. I love that. And actually, it makes me excited to get to go back downstairs. I'm about 8 floors above where the conference room, or not the conference room, the big room that all this stuff is happening in. I'm looking forward to it. It's cool to see. Melvin Hall is our resident Marine. Do you have anything that you'd like to say? And
my mind is blown. This was just what the doctor ordered today. Super, super information. And I love how you presented it for us. And I'm going to take it and use it to spread the word for other folks that came to mind and what we learned today. Perfect.
Well, thank you for your service, sir. I'm always honored by your presence in our programs and stuff like that. You definitely you've brought more sensitivity to my life about, especially the needs of our vets and stuff like that. And yeah, I think that there's stuff that we can do to make sure that we really support more information about this. And one of the sessions that I'm talking to that I'm going to be a part of this afternoon is going to even talk more about how is it we can support our war fighters and our vets and stuff like that. And we'll, if nothing else, if we don't do it on this program, I'll make sure that I follow up with you about that specific information, because it's cool. It's cool to see that the Army is really focused on the care of people, not just putting weapons in people's hands. So cool. Well, then what we'll do is I'm going to do my best with my little screen here to try to do the things to wrap things up. It's funny that at some point we're going to talk Zoom into making the controls a little bit easier to deal with.
Encouraged.
Yeah, we'll encourage them to do a little bit more about that. Whoops, wrong screen. I just want to, at some point, I'll get them to do that. Let's see. Here's the right one. Okay, so back to this. Really quick, if you've joined us for the first time, or you're not on our newsletter list, or not in a in our mentor list, or want to be a part of our country manager list, or you just want to connect, go to this website right here, techranch.com/connect. Sign up. We have a bunch of different things that we're doing on that site. Sign up here and get involved in the Tech Ranch. If you have a specific company that you want to make sure is on our radar screen for the conversations that are going on, the right way, I do not know if this other link is linked on that page, but the right way to do so is to go to techranch.com/contact us and make sure that you're listed. And if it's applicable to the 10 areas that I just read out, make it a point to actually say, hey, I'd like to make sure the surfaces for the VERTEX conference, the U.S. Army's VERTEX conference, and I will do, my team and I will do our best to make sure that we do so. For those of you all that are in the Tech Ranch community and you're part of the Venture Outfitters specifically, part of what we'll do in the show notes for today is I will post my larger list of notes, the VERTEX notes, and they will be available in the Venture Outfitter portion of today's program. So make sure that you go there. And just as a reminder, that's community.techranch.com. For those of you all that are not part of the community, but you've been involved in the past with Tech Ranch, just send us a note and we'll add you. We will have a more formal launch of that in the new year. So for those of you that haven't been associated with the Tech Ranch in the past, we'll be opening the door to wider access sometime after January 1st. Okay, well, with that, we'll wrap up for today. It's always an honor to be a part of a community of practice of entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values. Let's go change the world for the better together. Y'all take care and get out there and change the world. Ciao.
So bye. Have a good day.